4 years ago, I made a video on this, my dad's 2006 Mac Pro 1,1, and I concluded by saying that it wasn't a good buy. That video sucked, to say the least. People called me out for not doing my research, being ignorant, etc. Let alone the army of 1,1 users flocking to tell me how capable their machines were. And for the most part, they're right. To be clear, I don't mean anything by these people. The video was not good and needed more research. That's why I'm revisiting this machine today. But before I talk about it, I want to address the major criticisms of my former video. First, about the 32-bit versus 64-bit ness of the computer. Yes, I misunderstood what my sources were saying about this machine. The CPUs are 64-bit, meaning it could run 64-bit operating systems, but the EFI is 32-bit, so El Capitan is the latest version it can run, and you have to do some trickery to install Windows. This comment also states that I said that running El Capitan makes you lose internet functionality. I think they misunderstood because the machine didn't have a Wi-Fi card in it at the time. With that out of the way, let's get on to the specs. This is a Mac Pro 1,1 from 2006. It was firmware flashed to a 2,1 to support better processors. It has two X5355 Xeon CPUs with 4 cores each, running at 2.66 GHz, 32 GB of 667 MHz DDR2 RAM, the original 250 GB hard drive, and a 240 GB SSD. And for graphics, it has the Radeon HD 5770 that originally shipped in my 5,1 Mac. It's running both El Capitan 10.11.6 and 10.6.8 Snow Leopard. I do want to try to install Windows 10 and this R9 380 I have laying around to see what it's capable of later. But for now, let's do some benchmarks. Only one problem. Because El Capitan is almost 8 years old at this point, almost no software fully supports it anymore, which means Chrome, Safari, and Firefox use older versions, leading to security risks and some sites being broken. Not only that, but Geekbench 5 and Cinebench R23 won't run, so I'll have to settle for Cinebench R20, and I might as well throw in Unigine Heaven as well. Unfortunately, because El Capitan is so old, none of the Steam games I have will run at all. To compensate, I'll throw in some emulators to see how it runs them. Before I run the benchmarks, let's discuss the elephant in the room, the upgradability. If there's any reason to buy a Cheesegrater Mac Pro, it's this. Opening the side panel, you could see that it isn't laid out like your traditional PC, or even like the newer 5-color ones. Instead, the RAM is on these little cards that stick into the motherboard, and the CPUs are hiding under this metal plate. These are a pain to get out, let me tell you. The rest is mostly the same as the 5-color ones, but the PCIe is Gen 1, meaning it's slow as hell. And the DVD drives are still IDE, which means you're limited to 4 drive slots unless you want to use an IDE hard drive. I've been stalling long enough. Let's start the benchmark. First is Cinebench R20, and it doesn't launch. Well, onto Unigine Heaven, and with the stock, quote-unquote, HD 5770, it scores 331, which is not great. It was averaging around 13 FPS and had lows of 7. We'll see how it performs after that upgrade. Next is the list of emulators. First, the easy one, MGBA. No surprise that Metroid Zero Mission runs great on here. I'm sure the rest of the GBA library would have no problems as well. Next is Desmume. I tried Pokemon Black 2, and it runs fine some of the time, but has problems in the overworld, especially with the opening cutscene. It chugs hard here, which essentially renders it unplayable for most of the game. Maybe it'll perform better after the graphics upgrade. Last is Dolphin. I tried the original Pikmin at 2x native resolution, and it runs well despite some screen tearing, but that probably can be fixed in the graphics settings. The Wii version of the game is a different story. It lags a lot while you're not in a cutscene, sometimes as bad as getting 10 FPS in the Forest of Hope. However, turning the skip EFB access option makes it run better, but the camera movement is limited. Seems to be a CPU issue. Can it at least do some video editing? Well, I installed DaVinci Resolve 14, so I'll go ahead and edit this whole video on this machine to test it out. Stay tuned till the end. So, you may be asking, if you can barely game using macOS and some software doesn't even launch, then what's this thing useful for? Good question. And the answer is running old software. That's why my dad has 10.6.8 on it. He can run PowerPC software as 10.6.8 Snow Leopard was the last version of macOS to support Rosetta. The ability to run old software is great because it allows you to circumvent the subscription models while retaining most of the core features. Some of the stuff my dad has on here is Office 2008 for Mac, Adobe CS5, iWork 09, and Vectorworks version 12. Modern versions of these apps, save for iWork, are subscription models. Plus, he He thinks that the older versions are better anyway. Now, let's see if upgrading the graphics card to the R9 380 helps at all. Now, to change the GPU in one of these, it's really easy. All you have to do is open the side panel, and there's your GPU. Then you undo the thumb screws. Take this bracket off, kinda gently yank it out. Now this one loves to get the power connector stuck, so yeah. And there you go. Now for the new one, this is that R9 380 that I just had laying around. I think I got it as a Christmas gift a few years ago. Throw it in there, line it up, PCIe, then you'll know when it happens. Slide it in, and connect the power connectors. And on this one, you have to flip them upside down. Now because this is only PCIe Gen 1, anything more than like an RX 580 or something like that would be the start of the point of diminishing returns, just because the bandwidth is so limited. Yeah, I wouldn't really invest too much money in one of these personally, but that's besides the point. Put these back on, and there you go. It's in. Rerunning Unigine Heaven, and the 380 gets a score of 942 and an average FPS of 37.4. Absolutely smashing the 5770. Testing out Desmume again, and it performs the same as before. Actually, the Dolphin games also perform nearly the same as before. I guess that's expected. Maybe these apps aren't as optimized for macOS as they are for Windows. Or maybe these old CPUs just can't keep up anymore. We'll see in a bit. The only thing about this GPU though is that it isn't supported in 10.6.8, meaning that in order to run PowerPC software, you'll either need another GPU in the system at the same time, or need to swap them out every time, which isn't very convenient. Anyway, without further ado, let's install Windows and see how it performs. For transparency, I'm installing this old 250GB hard drive I had laying around, so loading times may vary. Keep that in mind. First of all, to even get Windows 10 on here, you have to modify the boot EFI of your Windows installer, which isn't that hard to do. A tutorial by RetKMods will be linked in the description. Second, I had to use a DVD, because this Mac only supports DVD media for installing Windows. I'm sure there's a workaround, but still. It took me 4 hours to finish the install, but I got to the home screen and installed the Boot Camp and graphics drivers, so we're set. It took an additional 4 hours to install all of the games, updates, and other software I want to try. First was Cinebench R23. It scored 2220 in the multi-core test, which is better than a 2017 MacBook Air with the i7, and never dropped below its base clock. Next I tried Unigine Heaven again to see if it could improve, and it did, scoring 1480, which is significantly higher than what it scored in macOS. Next was the list of games I tried. Rivals of Aether with 4 CPU fighters, and at the maximum settings ran at a consistent 60 FPS, with barely any CPU or GPU usage. It's a pretty easy game to run though. Universe Sandbox is a very CPU intensive game, which is apparent in the benchmarks, pulling barely over 30 FPS in the solar system simulation. Terraria ran great at high settings, hitting its 60 FPS limit basically all the time. Mind you, it was a new world, and maybe in other worlds it wouldn't have run as well. City Skylines is an absolute slideshow, barely hitting 15 FPS. BeamNG Drive also barely hits 15 FPS, even on low settings. Although I did retest later, and it did actually get closer to 40 FPS in some maps. Judging by the task manager, the old CPUs just can't keep up with modern games. It also doesn't help that my dry as hell Steam library has mostly CPU heavy games. Finally, I retested the emulators, and I found that Dolphin actually runs really well on Windows. Pikmin on the Wii and GameCube both hit their target of 30 FPS, although if you're playing Pikmin 2 Colossal Caverns, it barely breaks 17. This is a pretty hard game to run, even on decent hardware. Looks like the problem with the macOS version of Dolphin was that it wasn't optimized properly. Finally, I tested Desmume, which didn't run well on Windows, which is unfortunate. There are probably ways to get the games running better on here, but I don't have any more time left to test that. So with all of these tests, what's my conclusion? Well, the 2006 Mac Pro is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Don't get me wrong. If you have this machine and you only play light games and emulators and you use it to run PowerPC software, then great, but I wouldn't recommend going out and buying one. Why? Well, first of all, checking on Facebook Marketplace around the 5 major cities in the US, these things can run you on average about $80. Keep in mind that you'll most likely need to upgrade it and buy a new graphics card to match the setup I have here, so the price will be higher by at least $70. If you want to run old software, the 2010 Mac Mini can be had for around $40 to $50, which is more than powerful enough to run 99% of all PowerPC applications. You can even replace the DVD drive with another hard drive for extra storage. And the machine is actually pretty upgradable. If you want to run old software, games, and maintain the excellent upgradability, the Mac Pro 4,1 or 5,1 are available for around $150 to $200, which is totally worth it because even the single CPU variants of these computers will be on par with the max CPUs of this 1,1. Plus, you get PCIe Gen 2, which means any NVMe drive will be faster. It could support up to the latest macOS using patchers, and the DVD drives are SATA, meaning you can add more drives. You can even go out and buy an old workstation PC for the same price. Yeah, it'll be 10 years old, but you can still upgrade it to be pretty powerful. And it will have newer features like the 5,1 Mac Pros. I would say that the 1,1 is a bad machine for its price point. It's just outclassed. There really isn't any other way to put it. This computer is really amazing. To have it be this old and still have useful life in it is downright unheard of. I highly doubt any of the newer Apple Silicon Macs will last as long as this thing did. It's safe to say that it'll be a bit longer until it joins the retirees club. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Yes, I am actually editing this on this machine. I mean, there are some hiccups, but overall, timeline scrubbing is pretty smooth. Doesn't lag that much. I mean, it did there, but still, it's kind of impressive.